Less Taken contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Less Taken.
It's 1970. Construction at Kings Island Amusement Park is in full swing. Workers clear the land when they stumble upon something unexpected. An overgrown, forgotten cemetery. The discovery halts the construction as the workers try to make sense of what they found. The workers, clad in hard hats and reflective vests, are busy operating heavy machinery and clearing the dense foliage. The sound of bulldozers and chainsaws fills the air. Suddenly, one of the workers, a man named Jack, notices something unusual. He signals for the machinery to stop and calls over his supervisor. Jack points to a small, overgrown area that just seems out of place. The supervisor, curious, instructs the crew to investigate further. As they begin to clear the area, they uncover the first of many weathered tombstones. The discovery sends a ripple of excitement and unease through the crew. They realize they've stumbled upon a piece of history, long forgotten and hidden from the world. As they clear the dense foliage, they uncover more tombstones, some barely legible. One of them catches their eye. Among them is the grave of a 5-year-old girl named Missouri Jane Galliner. And this discovery sends chills down their spines. You're listening to Kings Island Cemetery, the 10th story from Less Taken, Season 3. In this episode, we explore the legends surrounding Kings Island Amusement Park, as well as that of a nearby and often overlooked cemetery. This episode, while touching on true history, will lean a bit more on the folklore. When you're done, please help the show by leaving a 5-star review wherever you're listening. You can also leave reviews at lesstakenpod.com, as well as suggest your own ideas for future episodes. Actually, a few scenes from this episode come from the first-hand accounts of one of our listeners named Daniel. Be sure to follow us before we follow you on Facebook, Instagram, sometimes Threads, and almost never on X, under the handle @lesstakenpod. I'm CM Humphreys, and this is Less Taken, real-life horror stories from the Midwest. As always, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy Kings Island Cemetery. Halloween haunt, Kings Island. The park is alive with eerie decorations, fog machines, and the distant screams of thrill seekers. At the back of a parking lot, a young couple, Sarah and Daniel, find a secluded spot at the park and relax before diving into the festivities. Sarah suggests that they spare a moment before heading into the park and pulls out a rolled joint from her pocket. Daniel grins and reaches into his own backpack, pulling out a water pipe instead. Sarah laughs, surprised but also kind of impressed that her boyfriend managed to smuggle a water pipe from Indiana to Ohio. We'll just assume the pipe actually comes from Illinois or Michigan, though. The two of them settle down, Daniel carefully packing the bowl. The night is quiet, the sounds of the park muffled by the car's interior and the trees around them. As they take turns passing the pipe, the world around them seems to grow more surreal. The shadows deepen and the air grows cold. But it's not the pot. Sarah freezes, her eyes wide with fear.
Do you see that?
She whispers, pointing towards the edge of a clearing. Daniel follows her gaze and feels his heart skip a beat. There, standing just beyond the trees, is a young girl in a tattered dress. Her eyes are hollow, her face pale and expressionless. You see a little girl? He asks Sarah. The ghostly figure steps closer, her movements slow and deliberate, methodic. Daniel's hands tremble, and the water pipe slips from his grasp, shattering on the floorboard. Damn it, he mutters. The sound of breaking glass echoes through the night, but the spectral girl doesn't flinch. She continues to approach their car, her eyes locked on the couple. Sarah and Daniel scramble out of the car, their hearts pounding in their chest. Run! Sarah screams, while grabbing Daniel's arm. They sprint toward the park entrance, the ghostly figure fading into the darkness behind them. As they reach the safety of the park, gasping for breath, they look back one last time. The parking lot is empty, but the memory of those hollow eyes lingers. The adrenaline from their encounter with Missouri Jane still courses through their veins as Sarah and Daniel make their way further into the park. The glowing jack-o'-lanterns, the fake dead trees, and the costume staff create an unsettling atmosphere. But they try to shake off their fears and enjoy the night. There's no way they're bailing after making the trip from Indianapolis. Besides, what would they tell their friends? That they went to the Halloween haunt and got scared? Daniel suggests that they take the train ride, hoping for a more relaxed experience. Sarah nods, clutching his hand tightly. They board the train, which is transformed into a haunted attraction for Halloween. The ride begins with an eerie silence, the only sound being the rhythmic and almost hypnotic chugging of the train. A rolling fog thickens around them, and the trees swarm in, blocking out the starlight and replacing it with long, jagged, and twisted shadows. As the train moves deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grows tense. Sarah and Daniel exchange glances, nonverbal magic that screams, "Something's wrong here." The train lurches to a stop. The lights flicker until they're completely out, and the faces of all the other guests are gone.
What's happening?
Sarah whispers, her voice trembling. Daniel shakes his head, his eyes scanning the darkness outside. A loud bang echoes through the night, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. The train doors burst open, and shadowy figures rush in, their faces further obscured by bandanas. The passengers gasp, unsure if this is part of the attraction or something more sinister.
Everyone, stay calm.
One of the figures shouts, brandishing a gun or something like a gun. Sarah grips Daniel's hand tighter, but Daniel can't take his eyes off of the weapon. It doesn't seem real. Something about it seems plastic. The bandits move through the train, their voices low and menacing. Sarah and Daniel try to stay calm, but their hearts continue their race together. Just as quickly as it all begins, the hijacking comes to an abrupt end, and the bandits disappear into the fog, leaving the passengers shaken and confused. Who or what chased them off? No one could see a thing. The train starts moving again, the silence returning. Sarah and Daniel try to catch their breaths, while a few other guests simply chuckle. The train slows as it approaches the area near the White Water Canyon next, which is now repurposed as a haunted maze. Suddenly, a small rock skitters across the floor of the train car, landing near their feet. A soft giggle breaks the silence, a child's laughter that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. "You hear that?" Daniel whispers, his voice shaky. They turn toward the source of the giggle and see a small figure standing on the edge of the tracks. It's a child, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his form almost translucent in the moonlight. The boy's eyes meet theirs, and for a moment, there's a connection, a sense of mischief and playfulness shared amongst them. The boy takes a step forward, and the air grows even colder now. Sarah and Daniel are lost for words, not that they intended on speaking to a ghost. The boy's figure flickers, like a candle in the wind, and then he's gone. The first chance they get, Sarah and Daniel turn and sprint away from the ride, their footsteps pounding against the pavement. As they reach the safety of the main path, gasping for breath, they stop for a moment and look back. The tracks are silent and still. The park may be filled with the thrills of Halloween haunt, but for Sarah and Daniel, the real terror lies in the shadows of Kings Island's haunted past. Missouri Jane Gleaner is one of the most well-known ghostly legends associated with Kings Island. Her story begins in the 19th century with her grave located in the Dog Street Cemetery, also known as the Union Methodist Cemetery, and also known as Kings Island Cemetery, near the park. Missouri Jane was a young girl who tragically died at the age of 5. While the exact circumstances of her death are unclear, some stories suggest she drowned in a nearby pond that's possibly part of the park now. The cemetery itself was discovered during the construction of Kings Island in the early 1970s. It had been largely untended since 1890, and many of the gravestones were buried underneath overgrown vegetation. Missouri Jane's headstone is one of the few that remain legible, and her spirit is said to haunt the area. Visitors and park employees have reported seeing a young girl, often in a blue dress believed to be Missouri Jane, wandering near the cemetery in the park. Wally is another ghostly presence at Kings Island, often associated with the Whitewater Canyon ride. The spirit is rumored to be a mischievous child who enjoys playing pranks on visitors and staff. Wally is known for throwing rocks and making giggling sounds as the park closes. Some believe that Wally might be connected to Missouri Jane, possibly even being the same spirit, given the proximity of the cemetery to the ride. The legend of Wally adds an extra layer of mystery to the park, with many visitors and employees reporting strange occurrences around Whitewater Canyon. The playful yet eerie nature of Wally's activities has made him a memorable part of Kings Island's ghostly lore. But he's only one part of it. The setting sun casts long shadows across Kings Island. The park is nearing close as Alex and his friend Mark linger near the racer roller coaster, drawn in by the eerie tales that they've heard. "Come on, let's take just one last look," Mark urges, his demeanor drunk on excitement. Alex hesitates but follows, his steps slow and cautious. The wooden structure of the racer looms ahead, its tracks twisting and turning into the darkness. The air is still, and the only sound is the distant hum of the park's closing announcements. As they approach the coaster, a chill runs down Alex's spine. "You feel that?" Alex whispers, his voice barely audible. Mark nods, his expression serious for once. They reach the base of the coaster, and Alex's eyes are drawn to a figure standing on the tracks. It's a small boy, dressed in white, his form almost glowing in the dim light. Alex's heart races as he realizes who it must be. He's heard this story before. He's looking at Racer Boy. The boy turns, his eyes meeting Alex's. There's a sadness in his gaze, a silent plea for help. Alex takes a step forward, but Mark grabs his arm, holding him back. "Don't," Mark warns, his voice trembling. Ignoring the warning, Alex moves in closer. The boy's figure flickers, like the static of an old TV set. And then, he's gone. Alex blinks, trying to make sense of what he just saw. The tracks are empty, but the feeling of being watched remains. Then, the sound of footsteps echoes through the air. Alex turns, expecting to see Mark, but his friend is frozen in place. The footsteps grow louder, and Alex realizes they're coming from the tracks above. He looks up, and there, standing on the highest point of the coaster, is Racer Boy. The boy's form is clearer now. His face is a ghastly white and removed from all expression. He takes a step forward, and Alex feels a surge of panic. "Run!" Mark shouts, breaking the spell. They turn away and sprint from the coaster, occasionally losing their footing along the sidewalk, slipping off the edges. As the air continues to grow colder, Alex can feel the boy's presence following them, a ghostly shadow that refuses to be left behind. When they reach the safety of the main path, Alex looks back, but the racer is silent and still, as if nothing happened. The boy is gone, but the image of him is burned into their memories. A hush comes over the park as Riley steps into the elevator of the Eiffel Tower. His friend Corey, a self-proclaimed paranormal enthusiast of sorts, convinced him to stay late to explore the ghostly legends of Kings Island. Mark chickened out at last minute, staying at the bottom, while Riley was left to nervously agree to go to the top alone. The doors close with a metallic clang, and the elevator begins its slow ascent. Riley takes a deep breath and realizes the air inside of the elevator is cold, and naturally so, and piercing. As the elevator climbs higher, Riley glances at his reflection. For a moment, he thinks he sees another figure standing behind him, a shadowy presence that vanishes when he turns around. His heart pounds in his chest, and he tries to convince himself it's just his imagination. The elevator reaches the top, and the doors slide open with a soft hiss. Riley steps out onto the observation deck, the vast expanse of the park spread out below him. The wind is stronger up here, whipping through his hair and carrying with it the faint sounds of the park. He walks to the edge, peering over the railing. The height makes his stomach turn. But what really bothers him is the fact that he can't shake the feeling of being watched. He turns, scanning the deck. And there it is again, a fleeting glimpse of a figure moving toward him. He wonders, is this Johnny? Is this the Johnny? Alex's breath catches in his throat. He backs away from the edge, but the sensation of being pulled back is unmistakable. It's as if invisible hands grip his shoulders, trying to prevent him from falling. Panic sets in, and he struggles against the unseen force. In a moment of clarity, he catches another glimpse of Johnny's face. Pale, sorrowful, and filled with a silent warning. Then, Johnny is gone. The pressure on Riley's shoulders lifts, and he stumbles back, struggling to catch his breath. The observation deck is empty once more. There's no one else around him to witness any of this. Riley hurries back to the elevator, his heart racing. As the doors close and the elevator descends, he can't ward off the feeling that Johnny has been the one watching him all along. And he's still watching. Always watching. The legend of the Racer Boy is one of the most enduring ghost stories at Kings Island. This ghost is believed to be the spirit of a young boy who haunts the Racer roller coaster. The story goes that 2 of the 4 cars on the Racer originally belonged to a ride at Coney Island called the Shooting Star. According to legend, a young boy tragically died on the tracks of the Shooting Star, and his spirit is said to have followed the cars to Kings Island. Racer Boy is often described as a small young man dressed in white. He is usually seen walking around the tracks or in a tunnel of the Racer, especially just before sunset or after dark. Guests and employees have reported seeing him and feeling an eerie presence near the ride. Some believe that his spirit is attached to the cars, and his appearances are a reminder of the tragic accident that claimed his life. Tower Johnny is perhaps the most famous ghost at Kings Island. His story dates back to May 13, 1983, when a 17-year-old named John Harder tragically fell to his death from the Eiffel Tower ride during a grad night event. According to several reports, Johnny had been suspected of drinking that night and climbed into a restricted area of the tower. He was struck by the elevator counterweight, lost his balance, and fell 50 to 60 feet onto the top of the rising elevator, dying instantly from skull fractures and broken bones. Since his death, there have been numerous reports of ghostly sightings and strange occurrences around the Eiffel Tower. Visitors and employees have claimed to see a young man in 1980s-style clothing walking on the top platform or looking back at them from the tower. The elevators are said to move by themselves, and many believe these incidents, as well as many others around the park, are caused by Tower Johnny's restless spirit. Let's do a quick recap. Kings Island, a place of joy and excitement by day, transforms into a realm of mystery, the paranormal, and the supernatural by night. The park's history is steeped in ghostly legends that continue to captivate and terrify visitors and staff alike. Missouri Jane Galliner, the young girl whose grave lies in the nearby Dog Street Cemetery, is often seen wandering the park in her tattered dress. Her sorrowful eyes and silent presence remind all who encounter her of the tragic past that lingers just beneath the surface and beyond the fences. The Dog Street Cemetery, also known as the Union Methodist Cemetery, dates back to the early 19th century and contains nearly 70 graves, including that of Missouri Jane. The cemetery was rediscovered during the construction of Kings Island in the early 1970s, also adding to the park's eerie history. Wally, the mischievous spirit of Whitewater Canyon, adds a playful yet unsettling element to the park's haunted lore. His giggles and pranks keep visitors on edge, never knowing when they might encounter his ghostly form. Some believe Wally might be connected to Missouri Jane, possibly even being the same spirit. Racer Boy, the spectral figure of a young boy dressed in white, haunts the Racer roller coaster. His tragic connection to the ride's past at Coney Island serves as a chilling reminder of the accidents that can occur in the pursuit of thrills. Tower Johnny, perhaps the most famous of all of Kings Island's ghosts, continues to haunt the Eiffel Tower. His tragic fall in 1983 left an indelible mark on the park, and his restless spirit is often seen or felt by those who dare to venture near the tower after dark. There are a few more stories to be told, but we didn't feel it was right to dramatize them. However, they're still worth mentioning in brief. The Beast, one of the park's most iconic roller coasters, is rumored to be haunted. Riders have reported seeing glowing red eyes in the woods near the ride, believed to be the spirit of a visitor who died while riding the roller coaster. Black Sunday, June 9th, 1991, is remembered as the deadliest day in Kings Island's history. 3 people lost their lives and 1 was injured in 2 separate incidents. Timothy Binning was electrocuted near the Bayergarten Lake, and his friend William Eddie Heathcote Jr. and a security guard, Daryl Robertson, died trying to save him. Binning ended up recovering from electrical shock. Later that night, Candy Taylor fell to her death from the Flight Commander ride. These tragic events have left a lasting impression on the park, with reports of ghostly apparitions and strange occurrences near the sites of these incidents. Lyon County Safari, which operated from 1974 to 1993, was the site of another tragic event. In 1976, a ranger by the name of John Jack McCann was mauled to death by lions after leaving his vehicle for unknown reasons. And some people believe his spirit still roams the area. Dog Street Cemetery and Kings Island are never truly empty. The ghosts of Missouri Jane, Wally, Racer Boy, Tower Johnny, and others remain, watching, waiting. And if not for the lore, there are plenty of very real dark moments in Kings Island's long history. The spirits of Kings Island are said to always be there, lingering in the darkness, ready to share their stories. Thank you for listening to Kings Island Cemetery, the 10th story from Less Taken, Season 3. This will be our last episode for a few weeks as we enter our mid-season break. We'll post some compilations and replays in the meantime. September, we'll be back in full force, and during this time we'll work on updating some of the technical stuff and prep for the big Halloween season. In the meantime, please leave us that 5-star review and rating wherever you're listening. Subscribe, share the show, tell a friend. It all truly helps. What also helps is checking out our updated Less Taken swag shop at lesstakenpod.com. Currently, when you buy a hat, you can get 15% off any t-shirt. No code needed, but this deal ends in September. Aside from the merch, you can always find our episodes, sources, notes, additional media, and more on our website, which again is lesstakenpod.com. Follow us before we follow you on Facebook and Instagram under the handle at lesstakenpod. Instagram is good for additional media and early samples, so be sure to check it out. A quick note on our storytelling. While we do our best to stick to the facts when we tell these real-life horror stories, we sometimes take creative liberties to maintain narrative cohesiveness. Obviously, this episode was a mix of history and folklore. Oh, and that weird stoner scene, as well as a few others at the beginning, come from a listener named Daniel, who saw a post on Instagram and used the website to reach out to us and share a couple of his experiences. I'm Sam Humphreys, and this is Less Taken, real-life horror stories from the Midwest. Once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you join us next Wednesday for a fun throwback, and definitely keep an eye out for a preview of our next story.